Hi, in this episode we're exploring a bit of Central Florida on the Gulf of Mexico side, Citrus Springs and Homosassa. There's plenty to do here. We'll visit some mounds that are almost 2,000 years old, a former roadside attraction that became a state park, and the old Yulee Sugar Mill Ruins. My sister Renee will be joining us, and perhaps a few cousins as well. There's an unusual site here in Citrus Springs where around 1900 years ago, Native Americans began accumulating these discarded materials into mounds, forming middens. You can see these mounds at the Citrus Springs Archaeological Park, which is a 61-acre area within the Crystal River Preserve. There are 7 mounds here, along with a trail and a visitor center that has a small museum and restrooms. The price is just $3 per vehicle.
There's a lot of trailheads that you have to drive out to get to, but inside here, Amy's up at the front desk and she can give you a map for just this site here, help you get around and understand what you're looking at.
We weren't going to walk back.
Yeah, it's a tough one. People start thinking they're going to.
No.
We're just going to go in and check out some of this museum area and see what we can find. There are 7 middens here, which were used for ceremonial and burial purposes. People would come from long distances to bury their dead and engage in trading. Among the debris found in these middens were shells, animal bones, ceramic pieces, broken tools, and bits of arrowheads. You know what was not found here, though? Manatee bones. There's a Smithsonian article from last year that suggests that the manatees may have arrived here, like many people do in Florida, as tourists. It suggests that until the 20th century, these gentle sea cows were visiting Florida regularly from the Caribbean, and then as the climate warmed, they became year-round residents. We're going to walk to the top of the Temple Mound, which overlooks the Crystal River. Great views and a welcome breeze. And these aren't the only mounds in the area. A study by archaeologist Gary Ellis found 50 previously undiscovered sites around Citrus County, but this is the largest site. Over half the sites that Ellis found had been destroyed by development, and this area has a similar fate. There are 7 mounds around this park, but there are fewer traces of some of them. For years, people have been removing and hauling away midden material, using them to build roads and driveways. Taking a break now with a late lunch. Another interesting place is the Ellie Schiller Wildlife State Park in Homosassa, which is along the Homosassa River. The big draw here is the Fishbowl Underwater Observatory and the local wild animals. Many who are here because they're injured or they can't be released back into the wild. The fishbowl is an observatory where you can go down and see the manatees and fish through glass underwater. Unfortunately, today, the fishbowl, the wildlife cafe, and several animal areas are closed because of how hard Hurricane Helene hit here last fall. Fortunately, no animals were injured. However, if you want to see the fishbowl specifically, you might want to call and check in advance. One other logistical thing, the hurricane also disabled the restrooms, so if you come here, you'll have to use one of the porta potties. We decided to pay the $13 fee and see what we could. And we were given this sheet showing everything we'd be able to see and not see today. It was disappointing because the fishbowl feature has been the park's top attraction. The original fishbowl was the first to be installed at the park by Elmo Reed in the late 1940s. Then David Newell bought the place in the 1950s and expanded the park with walkways. In 1963, when Bruce Norris bought the property, he expanded the original fishbowl into a 180-ton floating underwater observatory. Norris was also the one who added the pontoon boats and began adding animals. You can get a pontoon ride between the visitor center and the west entrance, but it will cost you $5. Eventually, in 1989, this became a Florida state park and was named after Ellie Schiller. One famous resident of this park is Lou the Hippo. Lou was moved here in 1964 when he was 2 years old, and he's still living here. He's the oldest hippo in the world. There's a big section in here filled with birds.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, see, they just pace up.
Bruce Norris, the previous owner, who started adding wildlife to the park, also made arrangements with Ivan Tours animal actors to house some of their animals. The Ivan Tours animals appeared in popular movies at the time. Among these actors were the bears from Gentle Ben. The show came out in the late 1960s. It's a story about a boy who befriends a bear called Gentle Ben. His father was played by Dennis Weaver. There were 5 different bears who played Gentle Ben. The bears resided at this park and the show was filmed here. Today there's only one bear here, called Maximus. He was abandoned by his mother and weighed only 4 pounds when he was rescued. This day that we're seeing him, he looks a little sad. You'll get a shock if you touch these screws?
Yeah.
Yeah, Joni touched one and she was like, Jesus.
Well, here we are. It looks like there are just a few manatees in here. Oh, yay. Another day and another lunch. We're wrapping things up here at Crumps. Just a short drive are the Yulee Sugar Mill Ruins. You'll see a small museum as you approach, but we've discovered today that it's closed, and it's in the middle of the week. Past the museum, there's the park, and the sugar mill ruins are just across the street. This steam-driven mill was owned and run by David Levy Yulee, here for 13 years in the mid-1800s. But there's more to this story. The Levies were Sephardic Jews who had fled Morocco during waves of anti-Semitism. David's father, Moses Elias Levy, moved the family to the West Indies, where they made a lot of money exporting lumber. But in addition to being a businessman, Moses was also a philanthropist. In 1821, the family emigrated to Florida. Moses bought 53,000 acres in north-central Florida with the intent to build a Jewish utopia for Jews who were being ostracized in Europe. David Levy was just 11 then when they moved to Florida. He went away to school, then became a lawyer, and then he had political aspirations. He started his political career being elected to the Territorial Legislative Council. He was concerned about whether his Jewish surname would make him unelectable in Florida at the time, so he added Yulee as his last name. When Florida joined the Union in 1845, he and James Westcott became Florida's first two senators. In 1851, David Yulee bought the 5,000 acres of wetlands here and had the swamp drained. Then he had the sugar mill built, and sugarcane was planted. He set up his home on Tiger Tail Island, which is just a few miles away from here. Although his father was an abolitionist, David had over 1,000 people enslaved working on this plantation. The business thrived here, and it was in operation from 1851 to 1864. You can still see the giant rollers and gears here. When the mill was running, this machinery was inside the building. During the Civil War, the mill began supplying sugar to the Confederate Army, and in 1864, Union troops burnt David Yulee's home and sugar mill plantation. Now, you're probably wondering what happened earlier with his father Moses and the utopia that he wanted to build. Well, after the Levies arrived in Florida, Moses bought land just a few miles north of Micanopy. He founded the first Jewish communal settlement in the U.S. It was 1,000 acres, and it was called Pilgrimage Plantation. There were 23 people who arrived, some as early as 1822. Building a community in the Florida wilderness was met with challenges. Both the Native Americans and the Micanopy locals were put off by this influx of settlers. And if 23 people sounds like a sudden influx, you can just get a sense of how sparse this area must have been. Unfortunately, in 1835, during the Second Seminole War, the Pilgrimage Plantation was burned to the ground. No casualties were reported. As a result, however, the plantation's location is still a mystery. It's presumed to be somewhere near Levy Lake, which was named after Moses Levy. And Moses passed away in 1854. If you want to know more about this story, which I found quite fascinating, C.S. Monaco published this book, and the book's available on Amazon. Well, that's all for now. I hope these places and stories inspire you to explore this area of the world sometime.